Good morning and welcome to the second hour of LoveBabz, LoveTalk on Babz Rawls-Ivy. This morning, I've got the filmmakers, the people who made this film at your Cervix. And let me tell you something, that freaked me all the way out. Like, I didn't even, just the clip alone, I was like, what? Good morning, y'all. How y'all doing?
Good morning.
Good morning.
So you're screening this film Sunday, October 15th for the New Haven Documentary Film Festival. And so I have so many questions. How did you know to even, how did you come upon this information that this was happening to women or to anybody? How did you know? When did you know this?
Well, hey everyone, my name is Imagine. I'm the director and producer of At Your Cervix.
Thank you for introducing yourselves.
Love
y'all this morning.
We just got right into business, didn't we?
Get
into it.
I mean, we did an interview yesterday and it was the same thing. I got so many questions.
It's like, oh Lord.
Yeah. I worked as a gynecological teaching associate for 10 years in New York City. I worked at every major medical school in New York, teaching students how to do breast and pelvic exams. And we would use our own bodies to teach. So it was a very unique and different kind of teaching. So when we started At Your Cervix, we thought we were making a film about that. And then as we weren't very far into the research before we found out that this was happening. And so finding out that that many students were learning, and I'm using air quotes here for our radio listeners, were learning or practicing in this way, practicing exams on anesthetized patients without their consent. We knew that we needed to include that in the film, and then that really ended up becoming the centerpiece of the film. We also show and talk about the GTA work because we feel like it's so important for people to understand that this very ethical, consensual, appropriate way of teaching also exists. So there's no reason for us to be doing this, for any medical school, not us, for any medical school to be doing that.
Oh my God. So when you bring it to their attention, do they say, my bad, we won't do this anymore? Or like, what is the reaction? Like, I'm just trying to understand.
I love it. It'd be that simple.
Wouldn't that be awesome? They're like, oh my God, we totally screwed up. Let's change this. I mean, I think that some people do. And I want to let my co's here introduce themselves and speak into this as well. I mean, I think that it's a range of responses. Some people are very defensive. I think when people realize they've been doing something that was harming people for a lot of years, that's very hard for many people to reckon with. So I think there's a need for some kind of psychological protection in that reckoning. And so sometimes that looks like standing up and doing what's right. Sometimes that looks like trying to right a past wrong. And then oftentimes it actually means doubling down and continuing the practice, because to not do that would then mean admitting that they had done something wrong. So I think we see a range. Olivia, Renee, if you want to introduce yourself, I'm curious what you have to say about that.
Go ahead, Olivia.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for having us on. My name is Livia Fry, and I'm the legislative advocate with the At Your Cervix team. So I actually joined the team after filming had been completed and after, right as editing was wrapping up, right before the premiere. And it's been such a pleasure to work with Imagine and Renee. I became involved in this work not because I witnessed it, but because of personal experience. I actually lived through abusive teaching practices at a prominent medical school as a child. Mine was not an intimate exam in the sense of a pelvic or rectal exam, but it was certainly very damaging, especially as it was ongoing and during very formative years. Um, Fast forward as an adult, I grew up, started working in the human rights space with a lot of emphasis on racial and gender justice. And I found out about specifically non consensual intimate exams as medical teaching practices and had to get involved because of my own experience and my own trauma. And I was so encouraged to see that there was such a movement building around this issue in no small part thanks to At Your Cervix, as it was already making waves. And I will say, just to echo Imagine, I have encountered before I started with At Your Cervix, I worked on a campaign to pass consent legislation in Connecticut, and then with Your Cervix, working on campaigns here. So much outright hostility from so many established members of the medical community. With young medical students, it's very different. They haven't gone through this yet, and they want to avoid it. They don't have that need to protect themselves because they haven't yet participated in this systematic abuse. But from older medical students, especially fourth year, even from residents, and certainly from established physicians, I personally have been called stupid or blind. I've, if you'll pardon me, had my own sexual preferences called into question, and just been attacked in some really rude ways by members of the medical community and their families, just because they don't want to see themselves in this abusive practice. They don't want to think that they've hurt people, and it's much easier to get angry at the people who are bringing light to the situation and giving a platform to patients' voices, because one thing I love is that this film really provides a way for patients who have undergone non-consensual intimate exams to speak about their trauma. I think it's much easier to get angry at the filmmakers, angry at me as a legislative advocate, than it is to acknowledge, wow, we've really messed up. We've really, really hurt some people, and we have to take a look at ourselves and our role in that and change. So the hostility is expected. I kind of write it off as the cost of doing business, and I'm encouraged that we are seeing a generational shift in these young medical students who are saying no more. We're not going to do this. We want to make sure that this ends with us. But Renee, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, you both have. I'm Renee. I'm the co-producer and cinematographer and editor of the film. I mean, you both kind of laid it out. I mean, yeah, when I've spoken about this film, to professionals, I either get like, "Oh my God, I never knew that happened. That's unbelievable," to what you have described, Olivia, as this defensiveness. And I understand, from their point, I think that they feel like their profession is being attacked, but if they're so sure that it doesn't happen in their institution, then why this resistance? And we've been talking recently, Imagine and I, about how, rather than being resistant, this is a great opportunity for institutions and schools to lead then and change this space, particularly in the light of like the Retrievals, for example, that podcast that came out. So that, yeah, it's an opportunity to lead rather than feel resistant. But that's hard. That takes looking in at yourself and what you're doing.
Well, I mean, it's not lost on me that women don't have agency over their own bodies. I mean, I'm a Black woman, so there's a whole history of gynecological experimentation done on enslaved women. So this is not news. What is news is that with all that we know about consent, that in this day and age, these things are happening to young women and whoever is in the spaces that this is happening to is happening, and there doesn't seem to be. I think once you know, it's outrageous to you, right? Like, I had no idea that this was a practice, and now that I know, I'm just outraged because I'm thinking, who made the decision to think that this was okay? Because I would imagine, ladies, women, comrades, that if you just ask, that
Yeah.
women would say for the love of teaching, absolutely. But
Yeah.
to do
You're
it,
go ahead, sorry.
but to do it under anesthesia, as if I would not know, and I'm sure there's lots of women who do not know has happened to them, but they feel off or whatever it is, and they can't quite put the finger on it. Um, it seems it makes it icky, right? Like when you don't ask, because we are in this moment of consent for everything. You want to hold my hand, you got to ask me. You want to you want to put your person on me, you have to ask me. And so why? I mean, what? So when people find out about this, when people see your film or you screen it, what is the reaction? How are people taking this?
Like you.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
I mean, the film, we focus on pelvic examinations, but when I describe the film to people, I do describe it as it's a bigger commentary about the lack of consent in the medical industry and how they're kind of the last institution to come around to the idea of consent, and this whole patient-doctor relationship of power. And it's time to end that power dynamic. And you bring up so many things that we talk about in the film. There are statistics that show that like 79% women, if asked, would say yes because they're altruistic and they want to help. It's the not asking. And it's the fact that these institutions or places are afraid to ask because they're afraid of the answer being no, which is then, brings up rape culture, I mean,
Yes.
so it's like,
yes.
just ask. It's really simple.
And I think it's not just that they often will say, well, oh, if we ask, too many patients will say no, students won't be able to learn. All the research refutes that. We know this. It's just not true, as Renee just said. But I think that the bigger piece that Harriet Washington speaks very eloquently to in our film is that this is about convenience. This is about the convenience of their processes and their modes of operating and of educating students, and the fact that this has a long history and it has been done since the dawn of gynecology. I mean, that is the thesis of our film, is we have an entire section on the history of gynecology, how it came to be as a discipline, which was on the backs of Black enslaved women. Horrific things were done to their bodies in the name of new developments that, essentially birthed the discipline of gynecology. And so, no, it's not a far stretch to see how this is where we are today, because that's where this discipline started. And until we reckon with that history, we're going to continue to see things like this. That history has to be reckoned with, and more people are bringing it forward. But this idea that their convenience and the things that streamline their job is more important than patient consent and bodily autonomy is outrageous, I think, to anyone who has been a patient. But sometimes I think there is, people in medicine they're kind of like the fish in the fishbowl. They can't see the water. They see medicine very differently. They see it through a really different lens, even though, of course, they at some time are patients as well themselves. And many people in medicine don't see what's wrong with it.
So where's the line? Like, are we talking all women, young women, children? Like, who are they? Who is this happening to? Because I dare say, I mean, children have operations all the time. I mean, do they wanna? Are they doing exams on children who are in the hospital, and they need to look at what this looks like pre-puberty and what this looks like in puberty and what does it look like in elderly women? And it's just, I feel like the door is opening so wide and I can't catch my breath.
I think that's a great question. And if I could just jump in really quickly, I have a quick comment on our previous topic, and then I'd like to speak on that really quickly. On our previous topic, I think it's just really important to highlight for listeners, if you hear a medical institution who speaks publicly on this topic say, we can't ask because patients might say no, I'm sure I don't need to point this out, but I just want to. Listen to what they're saying, because they're telling on themselves. What they're saying is we as an institution don't value consent. And if we think you might say no, then our solution to that is to just not ask you. If that makes sense, if I'm articulating that well.
No, you are. No, I hear the ease of, I could see the ease of that. No, I'm not gonna, you're already in here. We got you anesthetized. Listen, you know what I mean? Like, I get the thinking behind it. I understand it. It's quite brilliant.
And how far else does that go? Does that go beyond educational exams to other parts of your healthcare? You know, if they don't feel the need to ask you for consent in one area, I personally think that tells you a lot about their attitudes toward consent holistically. And I think that that's something that people, and that's something I personally pay attention to when I'm choosing a healthcare system or institution. And while I'm not going to tell anybody else what to do with their healthcare, I'm certainly saying that that's language that I pay attention to. On your question about who does this happen to, you know, I'll definitely let Imagine and Renee speak to the data specifically on intermittent exams, pelvic and rectal exams. But I will say that if you're a parent or a caregiver or guardian taking your child for healthcare, as somebody who lived through childhood, what I'm going to call abuse in a teaching hospital, it's so important you pay attention to what the consent forms that you're signing say. It's so important that you pay attention to what is going on in the room. It's important you understand that you get to say no, and your child gets to say no to student involvement in healthcare. Irrespective of how young your child is, that has nothing to do with their well-being. That's not a child refusing a shot because it hurts. That's a child being uncomfortable with their body being used in a way they don't like. You know, when I was a child, I was forced to take my clothes off for exams, which I didn't have a problem with, but the part I was really traumatized by was students being allowed to look at my naked body like a zoo exhibit or take pictures. You know, none of that is healthcare. That's medical education. And I walked away with PTSD. I walked away I entered a healthy child with a skin condition that had no bearing other than aesthetic on my health. I left with lifelong PTSD. So parents, caregivers, guardians, please pay attention if your child is showing any type of discomfort. Maybe they're not verbalizing it, but they can be showing with their body language discomfort. Ask them, are you comfortable having these students in this room? And know that you get to say no. Because nobody is entitled to your child's body, and it's important that they learn that lesson about consent early on. None of us, even children, are obligated to trade our bodies for access to healthcare. Access to dignified, safe healthcare is a human right, period. And we don't pay with our bodies for it. So in terms of, do pelvic and rectal exams happen to people who are very young or people who are postmenopausal or kind of post when you would typically access reproductive care? Imagine and Renee, I don't know the answer to that. So I'll turn it over to you.
I mean, as you know, the only reason that we know that this happens at all is because of students. It's because students have.
And that's what I wanted to ask, Imagine, because I'm like, how do you find out about this? Because once you're when you're under anesthesia, you don't know a damn thing. Because you know, we've already seen nurses and people taking pictures of people and putting them up on social media, so we know something is happening. I had no idea. How do you find out about this? Because students say, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm not. Do we have consent, or what do they say?
Well, there's been research that's been done that has found that, you know, in 2003, Ari Silver Eisenstadt, who's one of the main characters in our film, was in medical school and was told, because he didn't want to do this to patients, that maybe he wasn't cut out for medicine.
Whoa.
He was told, well, why do you identify so much with the patients?
Whoa.
Yeah.
Like, because the patients are not human? Like, what's the
thing? I mean, and again, I think that goes back to this dynamic, this hierarchical dynamic that gets created oftentimes in medical training between the doctor and the patient. And so he left medical school for a year to research medical education. And in his research, he found that 90% of the students he surveyed at the time had done this to patients. 90%. That is a very, very stark statistic. So there's been other research that's been done over the years, 2018, and you know, fast forward, because lots of people like to say, oh, well, that's old research, you know, it's not true anymore. To the contrary, 2018, a survey was published based on students in, I think, 5 different institutions at the time, some big institutions. And that study found that 92% had done this. And then just last year, brand new research that came out in the Journal of Surgical Education, peer-reviewed journal, across 6 different institutions in 5 different states, again, found that 84% of students had done this. So what does that tell us? That tells us, A, it hasn't changed. This is a negligible change. In 20 years, medicine has had the opportunity to change this. And this has been talked about. We've been talking about it. It has been written about, and it hasn't changed. There was a Hastings report also put out in 2021 that found that up to 3.5 million patients had gone through this. They were able to do a survey of patients, and they also found that Black patients, not surprisingly, were 4 times as likely to experience this. So this is another, like, very big health disparity, where Black patient bodies are seen as less than, seen as more available to medicine for medicine's needs. And so I think that that piece of this, again, needs to really be spoken, and to understand the legacy of gynecology that brings us to a place today where we have that situation. Now, there also has been things written about rectal and prostate exams happening to men, people with penises and rectums and prostates, and that is, you know, there's less research on that, but we do know that it does happen to folks of all genders. So all of the legislative work that we are doing, we are advocating that this be banned for all patients, that all intimate exams require specific informed consent and a specific process, and that there really be mechanisms put in place to protect all patients.
I was going to ask, like, what do you want this film to do? And I know there's layers to this, right? Because yes, you want to raise awareness so that people can advocate for the best possible health care for themselves, as well as have some agency over their system, their body. But legislatively, do you need law? Do we need law? Do we need more laws on the books that say we can't do this? Like, this can't be what you should be doing, and then have like an ombudsman or oversight of some sort to, like, when we're doing teaching of medicine, somebody says no, you can't do that. You got to get consent. Like, do we need that? Do we have to go that far? Do we need that?
I think that we do, and it not because the laws necessarily are the end all be all of what's going to change it, because I don't actually think that's true. But I think that the laws send a very strong message, and through the consciousness raising that is happening around the different laws being worked on around the country, and we're working on many in several different states right now, including Massachusetts, New Mexico. We just testified for Massachusetts a couple weeks ago. We're working on strengthening that law, because unfortunately, a lot of the laws being put forward are not strong enough. Wisconsin just put a law forward. Minnesota just put a bill forward, a bill, excuse me. These bills actually aren't strong enough, because I keep meeting students. I talk to medical students a lot now. I've become an advocate for medical students, and I've talked to medical students in states like California and Virginia who have laws on the books who are doing this today. And those were some of the earliest laws that were passed 20 years ago. So yes, we do need the laws, because people don't have a foot to stand on if they happen to find out this happened to them, if there isn't one. And we have a patient story in our film where she talks about that, where she was told by multiple lawyers, well, nothing illegal was done, so there's nothing you can do. And she's like, but wow. I didn't get consent. how can you tell me that nothing illegal was done? This is insane. So we do need the laws, but I think the bigger question is, how do we change the culture of medicine that that has persisted for so long, that is continuing to reproduce these ideas that patient autonomy isn't as important as medical efficiency, that they don't need to ask for whatever their reasons are. That is the bigger question, and that's something we're really interested in working with people on. How do we shift that culture within medicine? And we're starting with the medical students. We're working with medical students. We have a number of initiatives that are in nascent stages. We're working with the American Medical Student Association to work with students all over the United States, so that they can actually create a pledge of their own, where they're going in saying, I'm not going to do this in my training. And you know, we're speaking to them, we're screening the film, and we're in these conversations with them. And I think that is what's going to change this. If we have a generation or a couple of generations of students that say, we're not going to do this way. This isn't right. I wouldn't want this as a patient. I'm not going to do this. That's what's really going to change this.
And do you think if student advocacy would be the pushback to the medical schools themselves? Like, are they listening to students? Like, is the old guard listening and be like, all right, little students, I hear you. We won't do this anymore. Nah. Or is it, well, then maybe this is not the school for you?
It's very, very hard for students to speak up. And that is why we are in a process of organizing them, and organizing with the, you know, the biggest, most progressive medical student organization in the country, because there is no one single student that can hang their neck out there the way Ari did and not face retribution in some way. I mean, there's so much risk of what could happen to them, of what opportunities won't come their way, of what grades they may not get, of who's signing off on their papers and whatever when they're on their rotations. There's so much risk when an individual student stands up. And that's why we are working on bigger initiatives where we will be involving the schools and educating the preceptors and the educators about what is happening, so that it's not a surprise when a student says, hey, I've taken this pledge, I'm not going to do it. And so that they have some recourse and some support behind them, because without that, it's virtually impossible for a student to stand up and say no.
Now,
some of the laws that we are working on, Livia and Imagine worked very closely in Colorado, co-writing a bill that passed into law. And one of those, I don't know if you'd call it addendums, but requirements, was that a whistleblower protection for students, so that students feel safe. Because we have heard, as Imagine said, countless people, they come to our screenings, the students say, I want to do something, but I'm so scared. I'm so scared to ruin my career, to ruin my profession. So while there are currently, I think, 24 laws in place, only one of them we think is really, efficient or ideal. We want to, for future laws, and also go back to existing laws and put some of these other stipulations in, such as the whistleblower protection, such as like the bigger consent conversations that should be had. So it's not just like a line on a piece of paper. It's like, no, we're having a separate conversation about this. We are clear. It won't take long, but everybody in the room is clear about what's really going to maybe happen here with this person's consent.
And I just want to jump in really quickly and say, I do think that that's one of the places where these laws are really important. I 100% agree with Imagine that these laws are a starting point, not a stopping point. What we really need is a cultural shift. But there's also a need for harm reduction, because students and patients are suffering right now, and other staff members. The whistleblower protections in Colorado protect students and any staff member who witnesses a non-consensual exam and wants to come forward and report it. We've actually heard the argument from medical institutions, from individual practitioners who say nobody who doesn't have a medical education has any business regulating medical education. My response to that is, but we're patients. We're on the other side of that. You're using our bodies, and we should have a say in how our bodies are used. And the best way we can do that is open conversations in the public space through our elected legislators and ourselves at public hearings for these laws, where we say what we are and are not willing to allow. Keeping these conversations where they've always been, behind the closed doors of medical societies, behind the closed doors of medical schools and hospitals and health systems, which are very elite places that most people, including people here, none of us are doctors, we cannot access, only keeps them in the dark and only allows the very same people who are, maybe some of whom are perpetuating this problem, to be the ones holding themselves accountable. I don't think any human being can be trusted to hold themselves accountable when they want to do something wrong or when they're used to doing something wrong. It's like telling a child, I'm going to leave this lollipop here for you and not watch what you do. Please don't eat the lollipop. It's just not going to work. That's where these laws are really important. It gives all of us, the public, as patients, the opportunity to speak and say, no, this conversation is not going to happen behind closed doors anymore. We are going to be a part of shaping the policies that impact our bodies, and we are going to make sure we have legal recourse if we are violated, and we're going to make sure that people who are students or who are healthcare practitioners who do have our best interests at heart, who want to advocate for us, can do so without having to be scared that they're going to lose their careers or their access to the education that's going to allow them to have this career that they've jumped through absolute hoops to be able to get to, because they shouldn't have to risk themselves that way. And we stand with all of them who are trying to do the right thing and are genuinely scared of the repercussions, because the repercussions can be life altering in a very negative way.
So is this film doing everything that you wanted to do when you screen it in places? We got like 2 minutes left before I gotta, go. And this whole subject just freaked me out. I talked about in the first hour how freaked out I was by this because I had no awareness of it. But now that I have awareness, I can't unsee it, right? So now I can't be unaware of this. So is this film doing what you wanted to do? Are people having the right kinds of conversations that you want to see happening around this issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're still at the beginning of our distribution. We're in the first year of our distribution, and there are many pieces of in terms of our impact strategies that we want to see this film have. And that, as I said, that includes being able to work directly with the students and also with the institutions. We want to work with the institutions to help them update how they do this and to help them see ways that they can work in better partnership and much bigger respect with their patients, who many of whom want to be a part of medical education. As Renee said earlier, many patients are very altruistic. They want to help. They want to help students learn. I will often say yes when I am asked if a student can be in the room, but all patients want to be asked, and all patients should be asked. And, I think that the other place that I would really like to see our film support change in is in the birthing community, because there's no place, I think, where in medicine where there are more egregious violations on a regular basis than with people who are in childbirth, where people are brought into the room, exams are done without their consent while they're awake. And so I think this can have a lot of far-reaching impact. What I will say is, in all of our screens, people stay. They want to talk about it. They're stunned at the end of the film. It's a lot to take in, and people, they want to grapple with these issues and talk about these issues. This is about consent. This is about racial justice. This is about reproductive justice. This is about very important issues of our time, and all of them really come together in this microcosmic issue, which really speaks to the greater culture of medicine.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. That is pretty powerful. So you're screening it Sunday, October 15th here in New Haven. And I think a lot of people will be wholly freaked out as the way that I was when I got news of this. I was like, what is happening? And I'm here in New Haven, and I'm here in the center of a well-respected, world-renowned hospital, Yale. And I don't know what their practices are. I don't know if they're doing this or whatever. But I know, there's a medical school attached to the hospital, and there's some learning going on. And so hopefully there'll be people in the audience who can speak to that and say, we don't do this here, or if we were doing it, we're going to stop doing it.
Yeah, and yeah, we're talking to Yale right now. We hope to bring the film to Yale, and I think that when medical schools begin to bring it and have this deeper conversation, we're going to really see some shifts happen. So we really look forward to making that happen, and we certainly invite people to come out on Sunday. Livia is going to be there speaking after the screening and engaging the discussion with people. Please come out. We changed this together, and the way that we've been able to work in the states that we're working in to get powerful laws passed is by people on the ground speaking up and saying, we don't want this done to us. we don't want to participate this way. We get to do this better. So that is how change happens, and this issue is no different. And if people are in states where there's already a law passed, please look at what is in that law. And if you want to help us make your law better, talk to us. Please reach out to us. You can find us at yourcervixmovie.com. We're on all the socials and things. And we'd love to be engaged with people around these issues.
All right. Renee, Imagine, Livia, thank y'all.
Thanks for having us.
For bringing this conversation this morning. Thank you so much. I feel it's very illuminating, and I feel I can't unsee this now. Like I can't. Now this is part of my advocacy work. I'm just gonna have to talk about this and keep talking about it. Make sure I make it to the screening, and because this is, I just feel like women. This is a tough time for women to have agency over their own bodies, whether it's reproductive health or not, whether it's mental health or not. I don't understand why people don't want us to have agency over our own body, as if we have as if we are disconnected from it. So thank you all for this film. Thank you for the work that you're doing, the advocacy that you're doing, the awareness raising that you're doing, and thank you for coming to New Haven and bringing this film to the New Haven Documentary Film Fest. I appreciate y'all.
Thanks for having us.
All right, enjoy this fall day.
Yeah.
All right, Nora, thank you so much, and I'll be back tomorrow. See y'all.